it's not that all parents of anxious kids are anxious themselves, but what I can say is a lot of times even kids being anxious makes parents anxious because of what they have to go through with their kids. So there is a high incidence, and I'm very transparent in the book because I say this is for parents too, because it really is this 2-for-1, that what we're trying to do with our kids, we also need to be very mindful of how we think and how we act and how what we are modeling and how we're being in the world in our own lives in front of our kids.
Okay, so that totally makes sense to me.
And not a big surprise.
A percentage there, but there's correlations.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so, and to some extent, anxiety, at least at low levels, is perfectly normal. But you talk about in the book that we have a survival response. Explain that.
So the survival response, and it's amazing that we learn about geography and we learn about capitals and we learn about all of this stuff, but we generally, maybe later in high school and health, you might get this. So basically we all have these brains that we all know about, and we have our frontal lobe here where we do our great thinking. And then in our limbic system, in our emotional part of our brain, there's this little almond called the amygdala, which some people have heard of. That's our fear center. And that's the thing that is designed to keep us alive. So back when we are in the desert and we are hunters and gatherers, and there are saber-toothed tigers and other tribes that are trying to take us and our people, that's the thing that keeps us alive. It's like always sensing for danger. And when there is danger, boom, we have this system that goes into place to either fight or flight. Sometimes we freeze. That's not a good one. Like the freeze one, right? Deer in the headlights. That's not a good one. It does happen in intense fear situations. But often there's this fight where we're fighting for our lives or flying away, which means running as fast as we can. And what happens is when we get this signal, a message goes straight to our adrenal glands to produce massive amounts of adrenaline to get to our arms and legs to make us first strong and run and shut down other parts of our other parts of our body, our organs. When our body shuts down, here's the catch. We start to feel upset stomach because the blood is leaving our stomach to go to our arms and our legs. We're starting to get woozy. We're starting to get headaches because the blood is leaving our brain, because we don't need to solve a complicated math problem, Jason, right? Before when we are running for our life. And so what happens is we get all of these physiological symptoms of the survival response that produces all of this avoidance and this anxiety. And if we can really help kids and ourselves understand this is a natural instinct, and then start to ask ourselves, do I need my fight and flight response during this math test? Do I need it while I'm waiting to see if I get picked for the play? And so it allows us to start to know how our body works and start to talk to ourselves in a way that we can sort of turn down the volume.
So, well, first, I'm assuming there's not a lot of fear and anxiety that you have, so I will have the math questions for you later. But if people are recognizing, like, this is great to know this about how our body works, right? Like we know, all right, I'm feeling this way before I go on stage, and I'm having this reaction. I recognize, like, knowing it's a first step, but then it just doesn't go away still. Like it's like there's not a saber-toothed tiger tracking me or going to attack me on the stage, or, so there's a logical side of it, but there's this other part that's going on that still has kind of taken over my body. What do we do about that? Do you have, and I mean, that could be like real practical tips, but like, could you talk a little more generally about like, what do we do even though we know what's going on?
One thing to think about is how to, and I talk about this in the book, we talk about the worry monster as this sort of outside creature that gets to us. And when those of us who've dealt with anxiety or have kids that deal with anxiety, it's not all that shocking. Like, what's shocking is when we have this panic attack that comes out of nowhere, or if you're not an anxious person and then all of a sudden you get anxious about something, that's going to catch us off guard. But for those folks that have fairly regular anxiety or anxiety consistently in certain situations, it's almost like you have to befriend it and know it's coming. So instead of being sidelined by it, you have to be able to start to say to yourself, okay, here you are. I know you always come before a race, or I know you always come before I'm going to say a speech, and I have to breathe through this. So one thing is, again, to think about the breathing, because our breathing constricts when we're scared. And when we can open up our diaphragm and do some belly breathing, actually breathe through it, that's one way to sit with it. Another way, another strategy, another thing to think about is like body surfing or surfing, and you get crunched on a wave and you're getting kicked around under the surf, and you know from experience that you are going to get kicked back up at some point and you just need to hold your breath. The thing about anxiety is it always stops. Even our terrible panic attacks, it always stops. And we need to be able to talk ourselves through this in a way that says, I'm going to get through this. I know what this is like. I'm going to be okay. We call this self-talk. So the first thing's about the breathing through it, the self-talk through it, and then it's starting to really start to challenge your thinking. So we talk about metacognition, or thinking about our thinking, as a very important human trait to be cultivated, because folks who have metacognition tend to be able to be more successful in terms of carrying out relationships, carrying out problem solving, because you're thinking, okay, what am I thinking? What are you thinking? What might be going on here? So if we can help kids and ourselves learn to think about generally the fear statement that we're having, I'm going to fail, I'm going to blow it, people are going to laugh at me, my mom's not going to remember me and leave me here. We can talk ourselves through it. This is the cognitive strategy that also starts to turn down the volume. So we still have those feelings, but it's really about getting it down. Just Cecilia, you're saying we all have a normal level of anxiety, getting it down to a level where it's not debilitating or really impacting us.